Well, good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm Therman and I'm pastor of Morning Star Community Christian Center Church, located here in Linden, New Jersey, and that's at 1009 Chandler Avenue in Linden, New Jersey. And of course, we invite you to come and share with us and be with us at any time that your schedule allows. Before we get started with our lesson this evening, let me just pass on a couple of things to you. As many of you know, I am a physician and as well as a pastor. And if I could put on my medical hat for a few moments, it's important that we pay attention to what the scientific experts are saying regarding this pandemic that we're all facing at this time. So please honor the scientific and the public health pronouncements. Wash your hands frequently. If you go out, cover yourself, your face with a mask. Wipe down surfaces and respect physical distance. Because as you know, this is the main and the major weapon that we have to deal with this pandemic. Now be clear that you know, we will get through this. We will get through this. We're going to get to the other side. But it's going to be challenging. It's going to be, in many respects, painful. And because even as the church, we are not exempt from going through any of this. But the word does say that we will be covered through it. And so I ask you to honor the scientific and the public health pronouncements regarding how we can best take care of ourselves. And I thank you for your cooperation in that regard. And expect something good on the other side of this. As you know, the word says, all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And so here we are. Well, it's about time now. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll up our sleeves here, and we're going to get started. So, as is our tradition at the Morning Star Community Christian Center Church, what we do is we hold up our Bibles as we begin. And I ask you to repeat after me as we say, this is God's holy word. Receive it, believe it, and achieve it. And so I ask you to turn to Isaiah, the 53rd chapter of Isaiah. And I'm going to read from the contemporary English version. Normally, we use the English Standard Version, but this evening I want to use the contemporary English version. And Isaiah 53, verse number 5, says this: He was wounded and crushed because of our sins. By taking our punishment, he made us completely well. By taking our punishment, he made us completely well. He was wounded and crushed because of our sins, and by taking our punishment, he made us completely well. Now, the book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah wrote some 700 years before Christ. And what is very interesting is the great detail that we see the life of Christ, and particularly the challenge of Christ in the last week of his life, how it is detailed here in this 53rd chapter of the book of Isaiah, which many call the gospel prophet. And so again, from the English, the contemporary English version, here's some of what else this 53rd chapter of the book of Isaiah says. Listen, take a listen to this, and you can follow along with your own version. All of us were like sheep that had wandered off. We had each gone our own way. But the Lord gave him the punishment we deserved. Verse 7. He was painfully abused, but he did not complain. He was silent like a lamb being led to the butcher or slaughter, as quiet as a sheep having its wool cut off. Verse 8. He was commended to death without a fair trial. Who could have imagined what would happen to him? His life was taken away because of the sinful things my people had done. Verse 9. He wasn't dishonest. He wasn't violent. But he was buried in a tomb among cruel and rich people. Verse 10. The Lord decided his servant would suffer as a sacrifice to take away the sin and the guilt of others. Now the servant will live to see his own descendants. He did everything that the Lord had planned. Verse 11, by suffering, the servant will learn the true meaning of obeying the Lord. Although he is innocent, he will take the punishment for the sins of others, so that many of them will no longer be guilty. This is 700 years before Christ. Isaiah describing in great detail what it is our Lord and Savior Jesus the Christ went through. And so, with that backdrop, and that serving as the foundation of our lesson, I want to talk this evening about the 7 last words of Christ. And I know many of us, if not all of us, have heard them talked about, we've heard them discussed, we've heard sermons preached on them. But I just thought it would be important for us to revisit this. Why? Because anytime somebody gives you their last words, anytime somebody takes the effort and makes the effort to say something to you before they make their transition, you know those words are not only important, but they are absolutely critical, and they come from the essence of the life of that person, and they are giving them to you for your benefit as they now make their transition. And so we have recorded in the Bible what are called the 7 last words of Jesus. And really they are 7 last sayings. 7 last sayings. And that's what we want to talk about on this evening. Now the first thing I want to look at is how 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 does Jesus get on that cross in the first place? He was, as we know, condemned to death on the cross, and before his crucifixion, he was actually scourged. Now, scourging meant this. It meant that the criminal was subject to 39 lashes from what is called the cat of nine tails. What is the cat of nine tails? It's a whip. It's a whip that has a base, and then there are 9 strips of leather coming off the base. Each one of the strips has tied into it pieces of stone, pieces of bone, pieces of metal, or pieces of glass, such that when the flogger or the one doing the whipping, when they swung the lash, each one of the 9 strips that had interlaced in it stone, bone, metal, glass, would rip open the skin of the person being flogged. Now, it was Roman law that 40 lashes would kill a man. And in fact, the one doing the flogging served under a death sentence, such that if the 40 lashes did not kill the one being flogged, then the one doing the flogging would suffer death himself. And so the shredding and the ripping of the skin was so severe that there are some accounts that say even internal organs were exposed as a result of this lashing and whipping with the cat of nine tails. As you can imagine, this is an absolutely horrible means of punishment. Now, here's the interesting thing. The reason that the floggers served under a penalty of death is that when they did their whipping or flogging, the authorities did not want them to slack up at all. And so they whipped and they flogged in a manner to extend the most severe punishment, because if they didn't, they would be put to death themselves. Imagine that. Imagine that. Over time, it was determined that 40 lashes would kill the criminal. And therefore, 39 lashes was considered to be an act of mercy. And this is why you see so often in Scripture that, Paul experienced 39 lashes, and of course, Jesus in his scourging experienced 39 lashes, because the intent was to save their life, but to whip them to within an inch or a fraction of their life. And in the case of Jesus, since he was condemned to death on the cross, he was condemned to be crucified, they didn't want him killed by the flogging because they wanted him to experience the shame of being nailed to the cross and die that way. And so he experienced 39 lashes. Imagine that. 39 lashes with the cat of nine tails. 39 times. 39 times. Now, 39 times 9. 9 pieces of leather stripping interlaced with bone, stone, pieces of metal and pieces of glass. 9 strips of that going across your back 39 times. That really amounts to something like 351 lashes, if my math is correct. 9 times 39. And each lash opening up the skin, ripping apart, ripping to shreds, the skin covering the muscle underneath the skin, exposing body parts that were covered by both skin and muscle. Can you imagine the pain of being scourged? The pain of having your skin ripped to shreds 39 times by a flogger who is not showing you any slack. That's what Jesus experienced. And he was not a criminal. Here we are in the midst of Holy Week, the holiest week of Christianity. And I want us to get a feel for how significant this week is and how significant it is what Jesus went through for us, for you, for me. I cannot imagine, I cannot conceive, I cannot wrap my head around what it is that Jesus experienced. And I'm trying to paint a picture that shows us and gives us a small measure of feeling for the pain, for the agony, for the anguish that he experienced as he suffered through 39 flesh-ripping, skin-tearing lashes of a cat of 9 tails, pieces of leather stripping interlaced with bone, stone, pieces of metal, and glass. We cannot even imagine. And he was not guilty of anything. That's what he went through before he was nailed to the cross. And after the scourging, he was nailed to the cross. Now, during the course of this, of course, he experienced mocking by the religious authorities, mocking by the Roman authorities. They teased him, they made fun of him, they mocked him, they wrote signs and put it up over top of him. They called him the King of the Jews. They said, well, if you're the King of the Jews and if you're so high and mighty, why don't you save yourself? Why don't you bring yourself down from that cross? We should keep in mind that it was not the nails that kept Jesus on the cross. It was not the nails that kept him attached to the cross. It was his love for us. It was the mission that he came on, the mission of love that he was sent on by God. That's what kept him on the cross. And here we are during the course of Holy Week. Today, Thursday, is called Maundy Thursday. That's M-A-U-N-D, Maundy Thursday. Now, the word Maundy refers to a foot washing ceremony. A foot washing ceremony. Many of you will remember from your church or religious experience that you had a service where we washed each other's feet. Maundy Thursday, that's where we are now. And on this evening, when the Last Supper was experienced, during the course of that Last Supper, Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. And Maundy Thursday, and the washing of the feet served to raise up three things that are important. One, it represented hospitality. 2, it represented humility, because it's a humbling experience to wash another's feet. And 3, it represented forgiveness. Maundy Thursday. It will be followed by tomorrow, Good Friday. And then on Saturday, Holy Saturday. And then on Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. And so here we are on Maundy Thursday. And here is Jesus now, as we prepare to go into the 7 last words. Here's Jesus on the cross, having experienced the 39 lashes from the cat of 9 tails, skin ripped to shreds, and now nailed to a cross with the nails going through this part of the wrist on both sides, and his feet nailed to the cross below. And we should be clear that people died on the cross not from the nails and the in the hands or in the feet. They died from asphyxiation. They died from suffocation, because they would try to push themselves up, because that's the only way they could expand the lungs. But because they were so weak after a certain amount of time, they could no longer push themselves up, and they died from suffocation. And here's Jesus on the cross. An excruciating pain, having experienced the scourging, nailed to the cross. After 39 lashes of the cat of 9 tails, after being nailed to the cross, experiencing difficult and shortness of breath, here he is. And he manages to get out of his mouth. He manages to breathe and to say what we now call 7 last sayings, or 7 last words. That's the context of his 7 last words. And I think it's important to appreciate that in order to fully appreciate the meaning of his words. Because we cannot leave his words there on the cross. The importance of anybody giving you last words as they make their transition is for you to live them, for you to get some meaning from them, and so that they will help you in your life as your life continues. So first, generally, let me explain that the first three of these 7 last words, they look outward. They look outward. The second 2 of these 7 last words, they look inward. And the last 2 of these 7 words, they look upward. And so Jesus, on the cross, having been scourged, now in the process of dying, first looks outward, then looks inward, and then looks upward, and then makes his transition. I want you to reflect on that. Because what that says to us right here and right now, especially going through this pandemic, what it says to us is, first, I need to consider, how can I help somebody else? Look outward. Look outward. Second, I need to consider, what can I do to help myself? And then third, very importantly, I need to consider, how can I please God? How can I please God? Keeping in mind that when you help others, you help yourself, and certainly a part of helping others, if you're following God's will and God's word, pleases God. And so that brings us to the first of the 7 last words of Jesus. And we find the first one listed in Luke 23 and 34. And it says this: as Jesus looks out on those who are there gathered around the cross, Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And so this first word is about forgiveness. Say that. Forgiveness. Now get this now. Jesus is looking out at the people who flogged him, who ripped up and shredded his skin and his muscle with bones and stones and pieces of metal and glass. He's looking out at those who nailed him to the cross, and he says to God, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. He's asking, his first thought is forgiveness. He's praying for the forgiveness of his bona fide enemies. Now there's a thought for us, and that says to us that we ought to be using this time now that we have on us. Find somebody that you know you need to forgive. Or find somebody from whom you need to ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness is the first word of Jesus on the cross. Forgiveness. What a powerful thing. Asking for the forgiveness of those who have used and abused and battered and bruised and have put him at the brink of death. He asks God to forgive them. He prayed for his enemies. This is an awesome thing. This takes an awful lot of courage. This takes an awful lot of faith, if you will, to ask for forgiveness of people who not a long time ago, but right here, right now, battered, bruised, whipped, cut, shredded his skin. Right here, right now, God asks, right in the face of those who have tremendously abused him, he asks God to forgive them. And many of us are struggling with forgiving somebody who did something to us 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago. We still haven't let it go. The first word is forgiveness. I'm reminded that the thing that keeps relationships together is not giving, but forgiving. It takes a lot of strength to forgive people. You got to be really spiritual to forgive people. And one of the reasons many of us have trouble forgiving others is we have trouble forgiving ourselves. Forgiveness is a powerful word that we get from Jesus on the cross, in the process of dying, asking God to forgive those who put him there and put him there at the brink of death. Reflect on that. This is not just a saying of Jesus. This is Jesus speaking to us right here, right now, to do something to improve our lives, to do something to make life better. How is it that people can have loved ones, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, husbands, wives, children, to whom they have not spoken in years because of something that they did years ago? And we have not sought forgiveness. That's the first word. Forgiveness. Say the word again. Forgiveness. Say it again. Forgiveness. And now I want you to reflect on a forgiveness that you know you need to work on, that you know you need to address. And you know who it is, and you know what it is, and you know why it is. And the message from this Holy Week, this week when Jesus was crucified, the message that he left us, the first word of his messages was forgive. And it doesn't matter, as we see in his experience, it doesn't matter how bad it was, because it doesn't get any worse than what Jesus went through. And still, he mustered up the strength to ask for their forgiveness. The second word after forgiveness is found in Luke 24 and verse 43. And it says, today, as he speaks to one of the two criminals who are being crucified on each side of him, today you will be with me in paradise. And the word here is favor or grace or salvation. Now get this. There were two criminals being crucified on each side of Jesus. The book of Matthew says that both of them initially railed against Jesus by saying, like you know, if you're the king of the Jews, why don't you save yourself and save us too? But later on, one of the thieves, one of the criminals, becomes contrite and seeks forgiveness and has a different conversation with Jesus. Because he said to his partner, his fellow thief being crucified, you know what? You and I, we belong here. But this guy, he hasn't done anything wrong. He doesn't belong here. And so then he turns to Jesus and said, when you come into your kingdom, will you please remember me? And then Jesus says this word, today you will be with me in paradise. Right there on the cross, after living a life of evil and wickedness, and the Bible is silent on exactly what it is they did, but we can assume it was more than just thievery. More than likely, it was combined with insurrectionism, combined with terrorism, combined with murder, because those are the ones who wound up being crucified. But right then, on the cross, in his last moments of life, he asked God to be saved. He asked God to save him. He asked God to extend to him his grace, his favor. And what did Jesus do? Even after being railed against by him, what did Jesus do? He forgave him and said to him, this day you will be with me in paradise. And so the second word of Jesus extended favor to somebody who lived a life of evil and wickedness. He extended favor to somebody who spent a lifetime doing stuff that was against other people's lives. Jesus forgave him. Jesus extended favor to him. What an awesome and a powerful God we serve. Favor. He extended himself out to somebody to help them. Grace. Salvation. And so from this we can learn that it's never too late to help somebody. Nobody is beyond the reach of God. God throws nobody away. When we make a decision to turn our lives around, this is the posture of Jesus. This is the posture of God. He accepts us when we make that decision to turn around and come to Him. And it doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter how long you've done it, doesn't matter to whom you've done it. When you make that decision, this is the posture of Jesus. Now you know you ought to be serving a God like that. Not only does He have this posture, He has the power to turn your life around. So that's the second word. The first word is what? That's right, forgiveness. The second word is what? That's right, favor. And then the third word we find in the book of John, John 19, verses number 26 and 27. And it says this, "Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother." See? So John and Mary are at the foot of the cross, and as Jesus is dying on the cross, he looks and he sees his mother and he says, "Woman, behold your son," looking at John. And he says to John, "Behold your mother." And so the word here is family. While he is dying, he has the care, the concern, the compassion. He does not disregard his responsibility for his family. Look at that. These 7 words have implications for us who are still alive, and they ring down through the ages of time and the pages of history to tell us how we should live our lives today. From the very mouth of the Savior, who did not have to, but came to die because he loved us. First, he said forgiveness. Second, he said favor, help somebody. And then third, he said take care of your family. Forgiveness first, favor second, and family. Look after your family. That's your obligation. That's your duty. So Mary had Jesus. Mary was the mother of Jesus. And Mary is revered at a high level in Scripture. You know, Mary had other children. Sometimes my spiritual imagination runs away with me. And I wonder, what would it have been like for the sisters, for the siblings of Jesus in the household with him? Can you just hear Mary saying, "Why don't you act more like your brother Jesus?" Wow. What a burden that would be, huh? He's always obedient. He always cleans his room, cleans up after himself. He does exactly what we ask him to do when we ask him to do it. In fact, in his carpenter training, Mary probably had him make a bracelet for the rest of his siblings, a bracelet that had on it WWJD. What would Jesus do? Family. Look after your family. Be concerned about your family. Take care of your family. And during this pandemic, we are being given time imposed on us for our families to be in the same space. And so now we have opportunity to share with family. Maybe even have a meal together with family. And you know, that's pretty hard to do nowadays. But now, we can do it frequently. First word, forgiveness. Second word, favor. Help somebody. Third word, family. Take care of your family. And then we move to the fourth word. The fourth word, now, and keep in mind now, the first three words look outward. They look outward. They look at others, right? That's the outward look. They look at others. Now, the fourth word begins the inward look, where Jesus looks at his own condition and his own feelings and begins to express concern for that. So, the book of Matthew, the 27th chapter, the 46th verse, Jesus cries out this, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so he's feeling abandoned. He's feeling forsaken. Now get this now. In a real sense, Jesus is feeling like a failure because he feels abandoned by God. In John 10 and 30, Jesus says, I and my Father are one. He never, ever stepped away from what it is God had asked him to do and what God sent him to do. He said often that I came not to do my will, but I came to do the will of my Father. So any kind of separation between him and God, to him would represent a failure. Now, but that's not the word, see? Failure is something we have to consider because in the flesh we have to hear what Jesus is saying. But the word here is fulfillment. Remember, first forgiveness, second favor, third family. Now we move into fulfillment, right? Now, but fulfillment sometimes can feel like failure. And in this instance, I maintain that the fulfillment of why Jesus came in the first place was feeling to him in the flesh like it was failure. He felt abandoned. He felt forsaken. Why did he feel that way? Because Jesus took to the cross all the sin of humankind, past, present, and future. He put it all on his back. He took it all to the cross so that we might become the righteousness of God. Now here he is, and sin separates you from God. Every time you sin, every time I sin, anytime you sin, anytime I sin, it separates us from God. And that separation creates spiritual death. And we know that from the book of Genesis. So if sin separates us from God, imagine carrying and being placed on you all the sin of all mankind, past, present, and future. Imagine the separation he felt. Imagine the abandonment he felt. Imagine being how forsaken he felt. So he had to feel at some level, in some measure, like a failure. But in fact, it was the fulfillment of why he came. And sometimes in our most difficult time, in our most difficult hour, when we feel like we have just lost it, when we feel like nothing is going right, nothing has gone right, when we look back on it, we will see that it was at that time that we were actually doing the most, growing the most, and achieving the most, stretching the most, and developing the most, because adversity grows you. Resistance builds muscle. And so here Jesus was achieving the fulfillment of why he came. And simultaneous with that, I'm certain he was feeling a sense of failure as he cried out, "Why have you abandoned me? Why have you forsaken me?" That's his fourth word. And so he's looking now at himself. And he's feeling the separation between him and God. And separation between you and God, that's what sin does. And since he's carrying all of our sin, past, present, and future, can you imagine the level of separation he felt? Can you imagine the weight? Can you imagine the sense of abandonment? Can you imagine the sense of being forsaken that he felt? And so he had to feel a sense of failure because of this great separation, this great abandonment, this great feeling of forsakenness. He had to be feeling a sense of failure. And so he cried out to God. But notice the cry. My God, why have you forsaken me? Even in the midst of his worst pain, his worst agony, his worst anguish, he was still claiming God as his. Unlike many of us who, when we go through trial and experience things that we don't understand, we don't comprehend, we feel we don't deserve, many of us will abandon God. How can a loving God allow me to go through this? How can a loving God cause me to experience this? And we give up on God. But not Jesus. Despite the pain, the agony, and the anguish, he still calls him my God. And that's what God is calling out for us today. In the midst of our worst nightmare, our worst trial, our worst difficulty, our worst hardship, our worst despair, our worst depression, in the midst of our worst disappointment, God is saying, I am still sovereign. I am still your God. And you fulfill my purpose in Jesus the Christ when you do not give up on me. And you still claim me as your God. Wow. And so with that, we move to the fifth word. The fifth word is found in John chapter 19, verse 28. And it says this: I thirst. Two words. I thirst. This is Jesus saying, I thirst. Now, and this is the second word that Jesus uses to look inward. The first one is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Now, here he says, I thirst. This is the second word that he uses to look inward at his own condition. Now, there are theories about these words, I thirst. Some say he said it because he is fulfilling a prophecy that was written in the book of Psalms, Psalm 69 and verse 21. It says, for my thirst, they gave me sour wine to drink. So some say he's using saying these words to fulfill prophecy that was written many years ago in the book of Psalms, Psalm 69 and 21. Others say that he says, I thirst as an expression of his own physical pain, his physical agony, his physical anguish. And so that's the second theory. First, he's fulfilling a prophecy. Second, he's expressing physical pain. And then third, some people say he's expressing his willingness to sacrifice himself. So Matthew 20 and 22, and in this account, the mother of James and John, they come to Jesus and they make this request that in his kingdom, the mother of James and John, she wants Jesus to allow one son to sit on his right and the other son to sit on his left. And Jesus tells her, well, that's not mine to give or to say. And then he asks a question. He asks them, are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? And so some say that when he said, I thirst, he's referring to his willingness to sacrifice himself. He's willing to drink this cup that has been placed before him. And he's actually saying, I actually thirst to drink this cup. I'm thirsty. I have a desire to drink this cup because that's why I came in the first place. And so those are the thoughts and the theories about I thirst. And I thirst is the second word that refers to himself, which have the inward look. And then we move to word number 6. And it's found in John 19, verse 30. And it says simply this: it is finished. It is finished. Now, let me back up. I didn't give you the focus word for word number 5, I thirst. The focus word there is frailty. Frailty. See? In our flesh, oftentimes, we will be frail. Oftentimes, we are weak. In fact, we are weakest in our flesh. Our spirit is much stronger, especially when we pay attention to it. But in our flesh, we can be frail. And even in the flesh of Jesus, he was much more frail than he was spiritually. So the word, the focus word for I thirst is frailty or flesh. And as we go through life, we all experience a weakness in the flesh. We are all frail in the flesh, which is why it's so important to build our spirit. And so now on the 6th word, which simply says in John 19, verse number 30, it is finished. Say that. It is finished. And what is Jesus telling us? What is he saying in this last word on the cross? What is he saying? He's saying, I finished my work. What is he saying to us? He's saying, be a finisher. Be thorough. Be complete. Don't do stuff half-heartedly. Complete your assignment. Do your job. Be a finisher. He never did things halfway. He always did the whole job. And so now, in the 6th word, he's looking up to God and he's saying to him, it is finished. In other words, I did what you sent me to do. And I did it thoroughly, and I did it completely, and it is finished. And he's saying by extension to us, we must be finishers and not leave stuff half done. If you're asked to do something, do it and finish it. Now, as we consider that, we need to be clear that to be a finisher, you're going to have to be a fighter. Right? Because the enemy comes against you when the enemy knows you're trying to do something good, let alone complete something good. To be a finisher, you got to be a fighter. You got to be a fighter. To do your job, you got to be a fighter. Just every day when you go to work under normal circumstances, many of you know that it's a struggle to get through the day sometimes. And you got to fight all sorts of things just to keep your sanity and to keep your focus and frankly, even to keep your job. You're going to have to be a fighter. That's why 2 Timothy 4 and 7 it says this: I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. And I kept the faith. Wow, look at that. Tell the people around you, whoever they are, tell them, be a finisher, be a finisher, be a finisher, be a finisher. Don't stop in the middle of a job. Don't stop in the middle of the stream. Cross the whole river. Be a finisher. Don't halfway do homework. Don't halfway do anything. Be a finisher. Be all in. If you're in it, it ought to be worth being in it. And if it's worth being in it, it's worth finishing. Jesus was a finisher. And he tells us from the cross to be a finisher. All of us know people who are half-hearted about what they do. Half-hearted about being involved. People who have one foot on this side and another foot on the other side of the fence. People who are wishy-washy. People who are undependable. People who are unreliable. People you don't know, you give them an assignment, you don't know if they're going to do it or not. Some you give them an assignment and they start it, but they don't stay with it. They don't finish it for whatever reason. Jesus is saying to us from the cross, be a finisher. And then the last word, the seventh word, is this. It's found in Luke 23, verse 46. It says, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Into your hands I commit my spirit. And the focus word here is faith. And what Jesus is saying, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. And now I have kept the faith. So what Jesus is saying here, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. He's saying, now I rest. Now I'm at peace. Now I leave the rest to you. And I am confident, Father, that you will do whatever is necessary to complete my journey. He's expressing faith in God that God will do what it is he said he would do. Faith, so that finishing and faith are the final two words, and they look upward. They look upward. And finishing says to God by Jesus, God, I did what you asked me to do. I have finished. I have completed. I have been thorough with what you asked me to do. And now I have faith in you that I can make my transition, and you will handle the rest. And so he's saying to us, by extension and over the ages of time and the pages of history, be faithful. Be faithful. Be faithful. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it's impossible to please God. Faith, Hebrews 11:1, is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Faith is important to God. Faith connects us to God. Faith gives us confidence. Faith gives us assurance that everything is going to be all right because we are resting in the hands of God. So what do we have here? What do we have here? We have the 7 last words of Jesus. And they boil down to forgiveness, favor, family, those first 3 look outward. They look outward. And then the next 2, word number 4 is fulfillment. Fulfillment. This is when Jesus feels like a failure, but it is fulfillment. It's when he cries out to God in his worst agony because of the great separation between him and God. He is at that moment fulfilling why he came. Fulfillment. And then following fulfillment is what? You know it. Somebody say it. Frailty. This is a consideration of his flesh and his weakness. Frailty. So fulfillment and frailty track together as they look inward. And then the last two that look upward are finishing and faith. Finishing and faith. And so these 7 last words of Jesus, they were said many years ago, but they were meant to help us to live here today in this life. And they have tremendous, awesome, and powerful meaning. Forgive somebody. Forgiveness. Reach out and help somebody. Favor somebody. And maybe somebody that would least expect you to favor them. Look after your family. Look after your family. Care for your family. Fulfillment. Keep in mind that in your worst hour, when you're going through your worst nightmare, if you hold on to God, you are doing what God would have us do. You are fulfilling why Jesus came. Frailty. Just know that all of us are weak in the flesh, which is why it's so important for us to build our strength spiritually. And then finally, be a finisher. Be a finisher in life, in your career, in your relationship, in anything that you do. Be a finisher. Be thorough. Be complete. And the foundation, have faith in God. Keep the faith. Keep the faith. Prayerfully, we've learned something this evening. I'm certainly grateful that you have tuned in to listen to us. We're working on being able to take questions, which is what we normally do at our Bible study. And you keep tuning in, and we're gonna surprise you in one of our future Bible study sessions. We're going to open it up for questions. But between here and there, we're just so grateful that you have taken time to sit and to share in this word. And I'm prayerful that we will take these 7 last words with us. Write them down. Post them on your refrigerator. Rehearse them. Repeat them. Because as we look at them and go over them, we begin to incorporate them in our spirit. Right? And again, I'm going to repeat them again. Forgiveness, favor, family, fulfillment, frailty, finishing, and faith. Bear these words in mind. They are the 7 last words of Jesus. If we implement them in our lives, they will make a difference, a magnificent, life-changing, life-transforming difference in your life. And once again, I thank you so much for tuning in and for viewing us and sharing with us on this evening. And let me just say this before we go. Morning Star Community Christian Center Church is um, it's a giving church. It's a giving church. We have so many programs that where we give and serve our community that we've done, and we've done this over the years. And we believe that this is the posture of Jesus. We give things away, like food on a monthly basis. And I'm not talking about a bag of potato chips. We give full baskets of food sufficient to feed families with multiple family members for weeks on end. So we have food giveaways, clothes giveaways. We give scholarships, and we've given over the years hundreds of thousands of dollars to our young people, trying to help them to pay for their college expenses. We are a giving church. We have a homeless program where we feed and shelter homeless people during the course of the difficult winter months. And so we've been a giving church, and we've been that since our existence. And so I say that to say, we thank you for any support that you can give to us through this very difficult and challenging time. And we know that all of us are going through. But the church exists through giving from those who share in what the church offers. And in advance and by faith, we thank you for whatever support you can give to us during this time. As we plan to emerge, we plan to be resurrected at a higher and even better level on the other side of this pandemic, so that we will be positioned to not only continue what we have been giving and what we have been doing to help and to serve, but we're going to do even more, and we're going to do it even better. So once again, I say thank you.
Sunday.
I say thank you for sharing with us this evening. And let me say this before we sign off. This coming Sunday is Resurrection Sunday. Our services begin at 9:30. So wherever you are, in whatever time zone you are, keep that in mind. Services begin at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And those of you watching us, tuning in, California, Nevada, South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Alabama, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, we thank you so much. Please continue and invite somebody else to share with you. I promise you the word that we receive on Sunday will be a life-changing, kingdom-building, soul-saving message for you. Join us, 9:30 a.m. this coming Sunday, Eastern Time, and we look forward to being with you. Once again, thank you, and God bless you.